So what on earth does happen next? Well, let's try and shed some light on that. With me now, Catherine Haddon from the Institute for Government and our very own reality checks, Chris Morris. Sorry, my brain is addled.
That is my name.
It is. Catherine, first of all, lots of people getting in touch. And the first question, and the big question really, is can this process that Boris Johnson has set in motion today, can it be stopped?
Well, it's very hard to do so. This is one of the things that the Prime Minister has the ability to ask the Queen to set in motion. It is a remaining royal prerogative that is acted on through the advice of the Prime Minister.
And this happens every time there's a Queen's speech?
Every time there's an end of a parliamentary session. They can be 1 year. This one has been the longest one since the Civil War. It's been going on for far too long, and it did need to be brought to an end. The government don't have a lot of domestic legislation to take through. They want to put forward a new agenda. But doing it now and doing it for such a long period of prorogation, it could have happened over a week. You know, this could have been got through very quickly. So for such a long period of time, this is a very clear political move, and that is why so many people are outraged about it.
The Prime Minister says there is still time to debate Brexit. You've got the European Union Council meeting immediately after this period, and then there's time to debate. He's right, isn't he?
He is, and also we've been saying for a long period of time that actually the parliamentary sitting days were already quite short, and those who did not want no deal to happen had to act rapidly, think through what they wanted to do, and do it much quicker than the efforts that went on back in the spring, where it took many weeks and many different failed attempts for them to work out what they wanted to do. So time was already short. This will sharpen their minds. It really means that the next couple of weeks are going to be crucial, and they've got to think about how they want to act, and also it puts pressure on them to act together. And so that opposition meeting yesterday, that will be crucial in terms of can they act together, and also can they get a majority for all of this, because all we're talking about is ideas for what Parliament as a majority wants to do, and it ultimately depends on any side finding that parliamentary majority.
And just some context, Simon, about whether proroguing at this stage of the Brexit process is controversial. We've been looking back at what some cabinet ministers, current cabinet ministers, were saying during the Tory leadership campaign back in June. Amber Rudd, I think it's outrageous to consider proroguing Parliament. We are not Stuart Kings. Matt Hancock saying it would go against everything the men who waded onto the beaches in Normandy fought and died for, and I will not have it. Now there's a bit of wiggle room, because I think they may have been responding to the suggestion possibly that you would prorogue until after the 31st of October, so until after Brexit was already done. But their opponents will say, look, the net effect of this is to leave so little time for any other outcome that you are in effect doing the same thing.
Okay, now Matt Hillier has contacted us, and his question is, can the Queen's speech be voted down? And if it can, what are the implications for preventing a no-deal departure from the EU on the 31st? Catherine?
Well, this is something that might be, possible a few weeks hence, because we are looking at Queen's speech on the 14th of October, so that's still a long way away, and we're going to have a lot of action before then. When it happens, though, you have 4 or 5 days of debate before you then get to vote on the Queen's speech. The timetable will be even tighter. So really, it depends on what they've already tried by then. Most likely is at that point they've tried, those against a no deal have tried to bring in legislation, tried all different kinds of manoeuvres. So will they then just be looking at a vote of no confidence, in which case you don't need a Queen's speech to do that. That said, yes, any Queen's speech being voted down, this has huge ramifications. What they mean, how the government will react to them, we just don't know, because nobody's playing any normal rules at the moment. But it certainly means something. It's a very significant moment, and in the past it's always led to either the resignation of a government or a general election.
And to just say, worth reiterating that the timetable is so tight because October the 31st, the default position is, if nothing changes, we fall out of the EU, deal or no deal. And if it's with no deal, then it means all our relationship with the EU on trade, on security, disappears overnight. Now, the government says it's prepared to cope with that, it's ramping up the preparations, but it is a big, big moment, and certainly, therefore, a big decision to say we're simply going to prorogue Parliament for several weeks.
The gamble the Prime Minister is taking is that he's opened the way, well, a wider gap, if you like, for either parliamentarians to try to take over Parliament or to just get rid of this government.
Yeah, and I think it's quite significant. I mean, a couple of days ago we were talking about, is there a deal coming up? Is the Prime Minister getting some traction in EU capitals? And that might well have swayed a few Tory rebels to actually hold their fire for the time being, to give the Prime Minister a chance to bring back a deal. So the question is, has he just escalated things further? Are they now more likely to vote with the opposition, to bring in legislation to get another extension, or indeed to vote down the government?
And that is what the gamble is, isn't it? Now, this one from Chris Simon says, is there any valid reason why the government couldn't wait until after the 31st of October to suspend Parliament for a new session?
No, it absolutely didn't need to do it right now. It could easily have waited until after, and that's what many are arguing that it should have done.
And to give some idea of how frenetic things probably will become over the next few weeks. A text here from Clive Lewis, the Labour MP. If Boris shuts down Parliament to carry out his no-deal Brexit, I and other MPs will defend democracy. The police will have to remove us from the chamber. We will call on people to take to the streets. We will call an extraordinary session of Parliament. #People's Parliament. We've come to a pretty extraordinary political moment.
Catherine, I mean, there's no reason why they bring their sleeping bags in and they could just sit in, could they?
Absolutely, and this is what's so extraordinary. Is there a way in which you could try and stop proroguing Parliament? I'm sure there are some who are now considering it. It means, that it has to become and be notified to both houses. Will they try and thwart that? I mean, we are in absolutely extraordinary territory. We have been for some time, but it's
just a building. They could go anywhere, couldn't they?
They could, and they can try and find some other way. I mean, there's all sorts of technicalities of, what constitutes a sort of parliamentary sitting, the importance of having the mace in the building. We talked about that last time somebody tried to steal it, and that represents, Her Majesty in the chamber. So there'll be all sorts of constitutional debates about what they can do and how legitimate they are. But ultimately, yes, if they want to say we are the, democratically elected MPs, we're going to sit somewhere or other, there's a good chance they're going to try and do that.
Okay, now the government argue, of course, don't forget that we would have been in recess for 3 weeks anyway because of the party conference season, and this prorogation is only a little bit longer. The difference is, of course, is that MPs could have voted to either shorten or abandon the recess altogether. So when the government says, look, this is nothing to do with Brexit really, it's about us setting out our new agenda, the NHS, who are they trying to kid? Everyone knows that the minds of everyone in that building at the moment are on Brexit and how it's going to play out over the next few weeks.
Time briefly for one quick question. This is from Paul Balcombe. Is there precedence of prorogation being challenged in the courts? And if not, how likely is such a challenge to be successful?
This is something that constitutional lawyers are arguing about as we speak. I think the general consensus is it'd be very hard for such a case to be brought and to be won. I don't see any likelihood of it, and I'm not sure that it would really solve some of the issues, because mostly this is political issues that we're talking about.
Uncharted territory. If we were on one of those old maps, we'd be in the corner, the bit where it says, "Here be dragons."
A good way to end. Chris Morris, Catherine Haddon, thank you both very much.